Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Joe from GadgetryTech.com, and today we're going to talk about a networking solution from Zyxel. The main focus of this review is going to be on the USG Flex series. This is the security gateway from Zyxel. It's a newer one, and I like a lot of things about it. We'll get into the features in a moment, but I also have a Zyxel wireless access point. This particular one supports AX technology, wireless AX. So if you want the best possible speed, AX is something you want to be looking at. This is the USG Flex USG Flex 200, and that sells for about $600. And then this particular guy is the WAX 610D, also from Zyxel. I say that because Netgear makes something that's called the 610, and I don't want to confuse it. This is all Zyxel. This sells for about $400. So all in, the solution is about $1,000. The big advantage to a solution like this is you will have multiple access points. So I use this in a home environment, obviously, but the goal and capability of this can scale to a hotel chain or a hotel building. It can support large retail stores, hospitals, schools, whatever it may be. So the idea of this is it's a scalable solution, and this has a lot of overhead. So depending on how much speed you need, Zyxel makes a few different models from the USG Flex series. The USG Flex 100 is your least expensive, most basic model. It doesn't have the performance or rack mount capability that the 200 has. However, if you need something simple, let's say it's a small dentist office and you don't need a rack mount, it can just sit on a table or a shelf or something like that. It's certainly capable. I like the USG Flex 200. It's my favorite one of the pack for my application because it's extremely powerful and fast. I'll go over speeds and peak speeds in a moment. But it's the most powerful USG I could find that is fanless. And when you step into the Flex 500 and 700s, those have fans, but they're not that loud. It's anywhere from 24 or 25 to about 42 decibels. So the fan noise is minimal, but they do have fans. So anyway, going back to this guy. So as I mentioned, this is fanless. You have detachable rack mount ears. You can have rubber feet put on the bottom if you want to use this as a tabletop device. And it comes with the rubber feet in the box, as does it come with the power cord. I like the way this is set up because you have a standard console port in the back, the DB9 serial plug. So if you need to do CLI-based configuration going directly to the serial bus, you can do that. It has two USB 3.0 ports on the front, which is great if you want to do log capture. 4 LAN ports, you can reassign them. You have 2 WAN ports, so if you want a failover network, you can do that. And then, of course, it has an SFP. So lots of good configuration. This really is an incredibly fast product for how secure it is. So if I go into raw specs, so the SPI firewall throughput is 1800 megabits per second. So if you have a gig connection, it's good to have, again, that overhead. VPN throughput is huge. So one of the reasons why you would get a security gateway is to have VPN performance, and this has a 450 megabit per second VPN support. So that's extremely fast. It also has an IDP capability of 1100 megabits per second. And then if you get into full UTM throughput, which does your antivirus signature detection, your IDP or an intrusion detection prevention system, all of that will still support up to 550 megs per second. So this comes with a 1-year security license. We'll show you how that works a little bit further in this review because we'll actually log in and I'll show you the network interface. But the big reason why you get this, it's not just because you're buying a powerful router with VPN support. You need a lot of configuration control, whether it be an office, multiple hotels, etc. So having all of that customization is why you get into an enterprise grade or a professional product. A lot of those, when you get all the security features, there's either a cost impact, they get very expensive, or a performance impact. This is kind of like, it's my new favorite security gateway because it brings you tons of performance, but it keeps the cost very, very reasonable. So from an IT budgeting perspective, you can pick the model that gives you the throughput you need based off the number of clients that you have or inter-office communication that you need, etc. So performance of this is ridiculous. I completely saturated my ISP. I paid for 500 down and 500 up, and I benched 510 down and 530 up going through this gateway. So no performance impact whatsoever. And that's with all of these security modules enabled. That's huge. My old one, which was just as expensive, was getting like $275 300 tops. And I dealt with it because I'd rather have the security. But anyway, so another nice thing about this, I'm getting ahead of myself, but if you're looking, let's go into the concept of this. So you would have this. You would have a high-powered switch because chances are you have a lot of hardwired connections in an office, hotel, wherever it may be. So you would connect the LAN interface to a switch and assign and control those ports. Now, if you have a power over Ethernet switch, that will power this. This uses the standard 802.3 PoE protocol with 19 watt power consumption. You can buy either a PoE injector if you have a regular switch to make this power through Ethernet, or you can use a 12 volts. I'm trying to keep it simple here. So right now I'm showing you not 12 volt, but standard power output. Now this is rated at 2 amps. It's 12 volts at 2 amps. So that's where you get your 19 watt max power consumption. So honestly, even a 1.5 should be enough juice. But a really cool thing about these, I wanted to call out the 610 in particular because there is a LAN output. So you have your uplink port, which is the yellow, and that's what you'll connect to the security gateway or your switch. But depending on how your infrastructure is run, this has a 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet port in out. So if you daisy chain several of these because you want a single run, you don't have to upgrade your infrastructure to take advantage of that backbone. So if you don't want to saturate that 1 gigabit cable, but you need the overhead, just run the Cat6 directly from access point to access point, or Cat5e depending on the run or distance, and you can get your 2.5 gigabit throughput. So that is amazing. One other thing I want to point out is the status light. It's blue right now because this device is active and ready and connected. However, there are no hosts or clients connected to it. As soon as this has at least one client speaking to this access point, the light will turn green. And when you're connected to the access point, either in standalone mode or through the managed interface, you can ping the locator. So if you're in an IT environment, you try to label them, you can tell this to locate this one, it'll flash the LED, and then you can label it accordingly. So if this is in a comm room, conference room, lobby, whatever, that will help you remember which one's which in case your runs aren't defined in your office. Let's say you're taking over a building and you have no idea what wire goes where, but you have access points working. That tool will help you figure out where they are located. This is obviously mountable. You do want to mount this for performance reasons. You don't just stick this on top like that and call it a day. It's not optimized for that. So that covers the basics. I want to show you the interface to show how you can customize this and what makes this so special as a solution. The last thing I want to touch on the access point before we focus a lot on the security gateway. There are a lot of secure access points you can attach to this. However, not all of them can be managed by this. So some access points are standalone configuration or nebula based, or just so new or different as feature set that this won't detect it. This particular one, the 610D, can be managed as a standalone device. It can be managed via the USG Flex, or it can be managed via the Nebula Security Cloud. So if you have that, you can control it different ways. We're obviously going with the security gateway managed approach. So I'll show you how that looks and how to define SSIDs, policies, etc. But that's really cool. The other thing, physically, the reason why you get something like this may not be as fast. A single unit for a home is not going to be as fast as, an Asus ROG gaming router that's rated at wireless AX, 5 gigabits per second wireless or whatever crazy specs they put into it. This is a very stable performing long-range wireless access point. It has shielding put in place for 4G and 5G phones. Doesn't make a massive difference in a home environment, but you have to think if you're at a school or an office, everybody has phones, and if you're dealing with 100 devices, the performance will start to excel on this compared to a consumer-grade product. So if you're debating on a really expensive router for a dentist office, for example, versus something like this is for stability and longevity. It's built with very high-quality components. It's extremely fast. It'll compare to a more expensive home router as far as speed, but then you have the stability, scalability, and resistance to interference and stuff like that. So that is why you go with this. The big kicker being mesh, so you can have a lot of these in an office, and if you're moving around, you'll drop from one access point to the next and maintain your connection. So that covers the access point. We're going to start spending some time talking about how to configure this only in a basic sense. If you're watching this video, chances are you know how to configure a network because you wouldn't be looking at products like this. This is not for the faint of heart. So I'm just going to show you some basics because the interface is very different than the Nebula Cloud Series interface that I configured in the past. So with that being said, let's get into the software. So I mentioned I have the USG Flex 200. That's the one in the middle there, highlighted in red. Then we have the USG Flex 100, which all the ports are on the rear of the device. It's not a rack mount unit, which is why they put them in the back, because there's no need to have the cables going out the front. They have the USG Flex 100 wireless, which adds a basic wireless AC capable access point to it in case you have a small area and you don't need to have separate or multiple access points. And if wireless AC is fast enough for what your needs are. Then you get to the Flex 200. We'll go over the specs in a sec. Then you see the Flex 500 and 700. 700 is a full rack width device. It's obviously a lot more powerful. So big differences. Let's just highlight a couple things. The Flex 100 uses RJ45, so you have your Ethernet port. It does come with an adapter to give it an RJ45 to DB9 connection. It's just the way that one's designed. And then the Flex 200, that steps up to the DB9, which is your serial plug. It gives you a second USB port, which is continued on through the rest of the series, and it's rack mountable. Now, the unique thing about the 200, it is the only rack mountable USG that is also fanless. So I like that. Going into the performance, you look at SPI firewall capability. The peak speed of this is 1.8 gigabits per second. With everything disabled, and then with VPN on. I mentioned the specs earlier. The big kicker and what I like to look at, if you enable the UTM or the threat management interface or feature set, you have big speed differences here. So this is kind of what you base your decision on. If you need rack mount, really you're just starting at the Flex 200 anyway, and that still gives you half a gig per second with all the security features enabled, and then concurrent SSL VPN users of 60. So that's a lot of remote users. If you need more, go with the Flex 500 and 700, not only for the higher speed, but for the higher user count. And if I go down a little bit further, I want to highlight a couple other quick things. So the security features, what's nice about the Flex series is all of the security features are enabled across the entire lineup. You're not missing out on security capability just because you decided to get the Flex 100. So I like that. It's really just performance and form factor at that point. Now you have the access point numbers for managing access points. If you have a very, very large physical infrastructure and you need a lot of access points, then you're looking at the 500 and the 700. That's going to give you the most access points you can possibly handle. That should cover most environments without any issues. You have your encryption and key features as far as security go. So the hotspot management is really cool. I like that. It also has Microsoft Azure and Amazon VPC configuration support, high availability on the 500 and 700s. And then the other one is two-factor authentication, which is awesome. So if you're really looking to add security, it has that built in as well. I talked about security being the same. Let's start with the report. They have SecuReporter as a feature that comes with it. And if you click on that and open a report, there's a lot of cool things that they give you. This is more or less an affordable security platform for monitoring events inside. It's not like it's just blocked on the host side and you don't know whatever happened and you just trust it to do its job. It'll actually pull the data together to help you know it's performing correctly and see or at least isolate anomalies or interesting events, stuff like that. If I go into the analyzer, there's different categories. So it can do malware detection, IDP events, ADP. This is just a demo. This isn't mine. So I can't really control what stuff is put here. Some of it will be blank because that's just what they put in the demo. And of course, you can change your time range. But there are some really cool ways of looking at stuff. The destination IP stuff is interesting because if you constantly see malware or an infected host trying to talk to one IP, then just block that IP on the firewall to eliminate all potential traffic from getting to it. So it's nice that they give you this. Again, this isn't like a full SIM, not a full security platform, but from a budget standpoint, it gives you some pretty cool information to work with as far as protecting your network and getting a good pulse on what's going on. It does have the ability to generate reports. So if leadership wants reports, you can always pull this together. This had very limited information. Again, I can't control this demo as far as malware events, and I don't have malware in my network, so I haven't been able to generate it. But it is nice that it gives you this capability in case you do have events and you want to share it. Having that built in is pretty sweet. Okay, so for my demo's sake, and I'm zoomed in a bit, so hopefully this is legible. Right now I'm running a single host, which we're using for the recording, and I have a single access point that's connected to it on port 7. So you can hover over and see what the negotiated speed is and monitor that. Now on the dashboard, you'll see your basic specs such as CPU and memory usage, your DHCP table, which is clickable. So if you want to see who's connected, what the machine name is, the IP address, etc., you can look at it. And then if you have active VPN users, this will give you a count of who's on and what your bandwidth availability is at that moment. Now I've already created a basic configuration for this, so I don't have a quick setup. When you first connect to this, it'll give you a basic setup so you can set your admin username and password for access, and then your basic WAN configuration. We're past that point now, obviously, so I'm just going to go through the interface and show you a few basics. Now the left middle icon here, that's for monitor. So this is where you're going to view various content warnings. So if you're not using SecuReporter, but you want to see things that are set up, you're going to be looking here from a security event standpoint, reputation filter, IDP, email security, SSL, and I went through that kind of quick, so let me go back to email security for you. So it breaks it down by tab. Again, I'm not going to spend so much time on this because as an administrator, you're going to want to tinker with this on your own and set it up. It's going to be different for each environment, but I just wanted to show you that. So when I go into settings, this is where it can get kind of confusing depending on how your interface is set up. If you're finding that you have issues getting devices to talk, make sure that all of your ports are on LAN 1, for example, because if you're configuring everything on LAN 1 and your access point is plugged into P7, but P7 was set to reserved, now that access point will not be tied to your network and it won't give you the connection and configuration capability that you're looking for. So I want to show you a couple things because this is where I got confused at first and where this interface is very different. If you click on wireless on the left side here and click on controller, the default is always accept. That means if you have a new access point from Zyxel that's on the compatible list, it will accept and import it into your environment once it's plugged in. You can do this in the beginning, and then once you're happy with the configuration, you can then switch it to manual. That way you don't accept foreign or rogue access points without being aware of it. Speaking of which, you can define rogue access points on your network and create rules or categories of what to look for to make sure that you are aware of any anomaly type devices in your environment. When I go into AP management, this is my current access point. I can click on it and edit it. I can shut it down. DCS, if you're not aware, that's going to probe for wireless channel traffic or interference in your environment. So if you're not on the right channel or the channel that you're on has some interference, you can DCS and it'll switch and make sure you get the best possible performance. I like this part here. So if you have alerts, the locator, etc., you can turn your lights on and off to help identify which one's which. And once you do that, you can edit it and change the name of your device. So it's kind of cool to have that ability to control it. Now, when it comes to configuring your SSID, this is where I got confused. I thought it would have been in the AP list, but it makes sense now that I know it's not, because if you have multiple APs, you're not going to configure the access point SSID, channel, passwords, etc. separately. You're going to do that as a group. So here I have the particular device that I'm working with. This is the one that we showed you earlier, and I put this in the default access point group. So you want to make sure that's configured. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm overriding the group radio setting on that access point because I was tinkering with it in standalone mode. I basically said that, no, you're part of this environment now. You're going to accept my access point profiles that I defined instead. And that was, it was pretty cool to see it take over and make the access point work. So I was obviously tinkering with this quite a bit. And then if you had set your own IP schema for that access point, you can override that too and make sure that it's listening to the security gateway, or in this case, the Flex 200 for IP configuration. So if I want to configure this or change that group configuration for default and default 2, I actually have to go down here to objects. So this is where you configure your SSID. It's super important to understand this. Access point profile. I go to default, then edit. And you can create new profiles. This is how you can associate multiple networks that have different rule sets, frequencies, speeds, etc. But I'm going to hit edit. Okay, so it's activated right now. I don't have it on a schedule, so it's always on. This is my 2.4 gigahertz network, if you cannot tell. It should be pretty obvious, but you can have it for the channel selection is auto or manual. If you do manual, you can choose your ID. I leave it on auto because if you have a lot of devices, you really want it to handle that for you to make sure you get the performance you want. If I go to advanced, this is where you configure additional settings. Again, I'm not doing the full like IT admin approach here. We're just going to show you the basics. But anyway, this is the default configuration that I made. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to hit edit again, and then this is my default 2, which I'm using on the 5 gigahertz band, and you can choose what band it runs on. So if I want to switch it back to the 2.4, I can, but either way, we're focused on 5 gigahertz on this one, and again, we have the auto selection for my channels to make sure I get the best performance. Now, if you look at the top tab, again, this took me a while. So first you associate the access point to the appropriate group up here. On AP profile down to the left, you get into radio, but then you click SSID. You will click on your access point information and hit edit or add if you're missing an SSID. And obviously this is my dev environment, so I'm going to hit edit. And then this is where I can customize how my network performs as far as what the SSID is, my security profile, which is going to give me my password, quality of service. If you want to enable traffic shaping, you can do that and then target a specific type of performance, or you can disable it entirely to basically give free range for any device that requests it. And you can even select and define a manual bandwidth control. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do here, but I wanted to show you the importance of associating groups to the access point profiles and then assigning the access point to a particular group or a group to a particular access point. There's a few steps involved, and if you don't understand how this is separated, you'll be spending all your time looking under configuration wireless and trying to figure out why you cannot define your own SSD and why it's doing some default thing. So now that I got that, it makes total sense, and it takes seconds before hitting apply will reconfigure the access point to give you the capability, SSID, and encryption level that you want. So that is the basic Wi-Fi configuration. I'm going to fly through a few of the other things. Again, this isn't a full in-depth configuration guide. I'll obviously answer questions if you have them, but I think as an administrator, it's important to understand this and configure it for your unique environment. It's just too specific. So going into the network interfaces, you can configure whatever you want as far as protocols go. The VLAN capability, again, you can do more VLANs if you buy more capable Flex devices. The 200 still gives you a lot of VLANs to work with. And for those who don't know what a VLAN is, you're virtually segregating your traffic. Now, if you need to do custom routing, whether it be to talk from office to office, you can obviously set up your own custom routing table, static routes. This is getting into more advanced stuff as far as BGP protocols go. If you know what BGP is, you won't need me to explain how to configure BGP. Same thing with OSPF. So dynamic DNS, if you have a live DNS profile that will have different IPs but resolve to the same name, this is where you'll assign that. There's one thing that I want to point out. So if anyone's using this for a home environment or wants a very simple approach, I tested this out. Some environments may have something like a game console. Let's say you have a guest room that has an Xbox, or you're using this at home because you want the security, but you also want to be able to game or use a lot of different plug-and-play devices. You can enable UPnP on this Flex security gateway. That was not present in the Nebula series I've reviewed in the past. This can really simplify things as far as doing manual port forwarding on various services that may not work correctly. So that is a super slick add-on that I wanted to call out. Now, if I go into VPN, this is where you'll define your VPN services. You can do IPsec or IPsec, I should say. SSL VPN is your most secure, and then here is where you'll configure clients. You can do groups and assign them their own address space. You can say they use custom DNS servers, what their access rights are, etc. So you can configure multiple ones depending on the group that you want to give VPN access to. Again, this is a fairly complex process. It takes a little bit, so we're not going to drag this on too much. But there are 3 different ways you can see here that you can define it. And then when you have your VPN set up, you can provide the client software to put on the host to connect. Now, this has BWM just like the Nebula series as well. If you enable this, you may see a little dip in overall performance, but the idea is to make sure you're not saturating your network on one particular device and it's causing too much of an impact on other devices trying to access high bandwidth at the same time. Web authentication. So you can do client portals. If anyone is connecting to the Wi-Fi, for example, you can give them a warning or an agreement, if you will, that they have to check off before they're able to use the network, kind of like a conditional access policy. Or you can use Facebook Wi-Fi for user registration as well, again, to give you some control. Security policy, you can. So this is where you can define processes to block. It's your firewall rules. So if you have an issue with particular access that you want to block, you can block it by IP. You can block it by protocol and give yourself that control that you want. Conversely, if you're finding that the firewall is not allowing certain traffic that you want to accept, whether it be cross-domain traffic or cross-VLAN traffic, etc., you can define that as well and make sure that that gets through. Okay, so now that we're under the security service section on the left-hand side, you have different security content categories. You have app patrol, content filter, etc. That requires an active license. Now, if this is active, and when you buy the device, it comes with a year of service, the auto update is enabled. However, you can check for manual updates. Now, this was last checked very recently, and you can tell the release dates are only a few days old. So they do update quite frequently. If you want to force an update or do a manual update, you can click this little cloud icon on the right here with the arrow pointing down, or you can schedule it to enable or disable auto update, how often you want to check, or what day of the week you want it to check and apply the update. If I go to content filtering, you can see how it's separated here. And again, I can add different categories. So this is, I'm not spending too much time on this, but you can have it set policies defined to block or warn depending on the content category. And there are a lot of categories to choose from. A lot of home routers only give you 4 or 5. You know, it'll say adult content, firearms, gambling, pornography, etc. This really breaks it down to a much more specific level to give you a lot of control. So now, whenever you do that, obviously you could get some false positives or some misses. So just make sure that you don't assume this is an all-inclusive thing. Anything that's been categorized correctly will work. Conversely, if it's uncategorized, you can also create policies based off that. So we're going to cancel this. Anti-malware is a pretty amazing program. So it actually has a sandbox capability where it can take test files and send them out to have an analysis done, and it'll give you on your SecuReporter reports, you can actually look at the hash values and everything and what that file was detected as. So reputation filter, if I enable URL blocking, again, I can, anything that passes their filter that's identified as one of these threat categories, you can have it automatically blocked, and that's where you'll see those events generated on your reports or your logs, depending on how you have it set up. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on every single thing, but it is important to show you what level of detail that you get on the configuration and security side. This is a security device, so naturally there's a lot of focus on this capability. It's not a basic firewall router. It's a very smart firewall router that allows you to filter out content based off what it's seeing. And then if I go into my object, again, I touched on this earlier with the AP profile. However, you can define your users and groups here. This is extremely important for VPN users, access rights, etc. So you can see how it's set up here. You can have multiple groups and users, of course. There's a lot. And then going back to that page I showed earlier, there's a very large number of users and groups that each device supports. And if you get into the Flex 500 and 700, those numbers, of course, go up even higher. Okay, so I want to point out, I mentioned the SecuReporter earlier. I showed you that quick demo that they provided. My license right now is good until September of 2021. I have it disabled at the moment, but if I enable this, it'll prompt you with a EULA agreement, basically saying that you understand what it's doing and what it's collecting. You scroll all the way down, read your content, and once you acknowledge, now we're enabled, I'd have to hit apply, but this is focusing on these events, actual security events, and those, of course, are defined by your configuration you've done earlier in the security policies. Now, I can also do it on traffic log. Keep in mind, when you do full traffic log analysis, it will impact your performance a bit, but it will also give you more visibility on what's happening, and that will include IP and MAC addresses if you go all the way down to the layer 2. Under the maintenance section too, you can see it has a file manager. So all your configurations you can copy them, you can reapply them if you've messed something up. So version management is super important in a big infrastructure. If everything's working, but you plan on making a lot of changes, just make sure you back up that environment first, save it locally as a precaution in case you do something to the device, and then you can make your changes. So it has a lot of control there as far as versioning. Same thing with your firmware. You can have a duplicate firmware. There is a standby, so if there's problems from an update, you could certainly fix that. Okay, so as far as the licensing goes, the device comes with the full UTM security pack. Now you get 1 year plus a 30-day trial, so basically a 13-month license included with your purchase. That gives you some time to kind of hit the ground running and understand what you get for features. This does a good job of breaking down what features you get with the security pack. You can buy licenses online through third party, but Zyxel also sells the licensing directly. The hospitality pack is more focused on the access point control. So if you want better hotspot management and AP provisioning and stuff, that's where you go with the hospitality pack. The UTM one is really where all the security is. Now, if you want to extend this, you log into your Zyxel account once you set it up. Now, once you log into the Zyxel marketplace, you'll see any device registered to your account where you can purchase additional licensing for. So here I have my Flex 200 down on the list. It's the only device listed. If I click it, on the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to see how many days left I have for each particular module and what license name that falls under. This can be purchased as a bundle. So I'm going to click X, put a check mark here, and hit Next. And I wanted to show you, because as of December 2020, my current renewal price for this package to keep going with all the features I have is $391, and that'll give me all the protection I need as far as the IDP, the malware analysis, content filtering, etc. So I just wanted to show you how that process works. You can buy the licensing through third parties as well, but Zyxel does offer it through their store directly. All right, so hopefully after watching this, I helped make your decision a little bit easier. There are a lot of products to choose from out there for a solution like this. There's prosumer or consumer grade products if you're looking at something very basic for a small location. Then there's full-on enterprise stuff from Cisco and Juniper that can cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars depending on the capability you need. I've loved and used Zyxel a lot in the past. To me, it's really a balancing act, right? So what I like about Zyxel is you get the performance, you get the reliability, and you get a very good value on cost without hurting your ability to do your job as an IT person. So if you're an IT guy and you're looking into this, after seeing that interface and kind of knowing what to expect, the goal is to submit something to get budget approvals for a networking upgrade. That will get approved because you actually want to get that networking equipment, but you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot either and not get the customization or control you need to do a good job at your job. So this is why I like this particular package so much, is because you get incredible performance. Users should not be complaining because realistically, this is really, really good in terms of raw speed, including a lot of clients using it at once. But it's going to last a long time, so you don't have to deal with troubleshooting or ticketing as much. I think the licensing model is fair considering the security that it offers, but you can always shut off some of that or use only the modules that you need for your environment. So very, very scalable and customizable, not only from a software and licensing perspective, but from a hardware perspective. There's a lot of different access points to choose from. There's different security gateways to choose from depending on your performance. So anyway, guys, I hope you found this helpful and it helps you do your job better or make the right decision. And if you have any questions, shoot me a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.